Hi, my name is Andrew Connor. I'm the pastor of Susanna Wesley United Methodist Church in Topeka, Kansas, and we're reading through Canoeing the Mountains by Tod Bolsinger. It's a part of our leader development reading club, and I invite you to join with me as we read through this book together and consider the implications for ourselves and for our community of faith. We are today taking a look at chapter 3, a leadership model for Uncharted Territory. And in each of these chapters, I'm inviting you to use a tool to help engage with the content that you might be able to share with others, and I'll use those today. The first is a question mark. This is when you've learned something new or the text raises some additional questions that you have and you want to explore further. The second symbol is a sun or a light, and that is where the text sheds light or gives perspective on something in your life or something that's going on in your community of faith, gives light or perspective on the text that you read. Finally, the arrow is a symbol that gives guidance or direction that points a way ahead and maybe invites particular actions from us for our community. So we're going to take a look at chapter 3. Again, like I said, a leadership model for Uncharted Territory. And for me, again, each of these chapters have been just really rich with implications and possibilities. So I'm just going to choose a few of the highlights for me from this chapter. In response to the question, the new thing, or one of the things that really struck me as being new and indicated some learning for me was this quote. He shared this realization where he heard a voice as if from God that said, "Your people need you to lead them even more than preach to them." Your people need you to lead them even more than preach to them. And he goes on to contrast the difference between the world that it was like when it was assumed that everybody was a Christian and what it's like now, after that time, after a post-Christendom time. And he writes this: in the Christendom world, when everyone was assumed to be part of the church, speaking was leading. Speaking was leading. In the post-Christendom world, leading is multidimensional, apostolic, relational, and adaptive. This was new for me. Oftentimes I think about the sermon that I preach as one of the primary ways that I lead in the congregation, and the author is reminding us that it's more than that. There's a lot more aspects to leading, especially in today's world. So that was the question mark for me in this chapter 3. The sun or the light that gives a perspective for me was really this idea that he shared of technical problems and adaptive challenges. Now I've had the chance to learn about this difference in other settings as well, but he puts it really clearly in this chapter, and I think it really gives some perspective about where we're at Susanna Wesley here and at this moment. He writes this: adaptive challenges, by contrast to technical problems, adaptive challenges are those that cannot be solved with one's existing knowledge and skills, requiring people to make a shift in their values, expectations, attitudes, or habits of behavior. Now, I found the adaptive challenges, this idea really shedding light of some of where we are at Susanna Wesley here at the beginning of 2021. We have, for a number of years, had decreasing worship attendance. That's a trend that's extended not just back to the pandemic, the beginning of the pandemic, but even years before that. We've had about a decade of decrease in worship attendance. Now, why is that? There's a lot of technical answers to that question involving the worship order, the music, the preaching style, the preaching length. Do we have communion? Do we not have communion? And I think we can make improvements in that, and we certainly do have technical improvements to make just from existing knowledge that we can learn from someone else. But I think it's more of an adaptive challenge to ask the question, well, why is that? Why is it that people in our community aren't connected with God through worship? That not as many people are connected with God through worship today than they were 5 years ago or 10 years ago? Now that's a question that's going to require some learning. It's going to require myself, it's going to require us as a congregation to do some things differently. And I think that's one of the adaptive challenges that we have before us today. We also have a situation that's new for Susanna Wesley. We are anticipating the possibility of entering the fall with no children in the nursery, no one in our pre-K or preschool Sunday school class. Now, that's not something that started this year. That's the result of a trend that may be related to this worship attendance trend, but why is that? We provide great care. We have excellent programs. We have great volunteer teachers that help lead and care and pour into and invest in the life of children. But why do we find ourselves at the place where There's no one. There's none of our youngest ones that are planning to connect, at least that we know of so far. I think this is an adaptive challenge. And there's a number of other adaptive challenges that we're facing as a congregation, but these are just two where this text helped me realize that it's not a matter of having the right answers or learning more skills or putting some existing knowledge into place. We've got to do some learning. We've got to pay attention to the community around us, and we have to change the way that we approach these issues, the way that we approach our community if we want to see some progress made on these challenges. We're not going to solve them, but I think we can make progress. And that was the light for me in this chapter, that we have adaptive challenges that we have to face as a congregation, and it's going to require something different than existing knowledge or even existing knowledge we can learn from other congregations. Finally, the arrow that gives guidance or direction that points a way ahead for me and perhaps for Susanna Wesley, Tod Bolsinger writes this: "Nothing changes until there is a change in behavior. Nothing has changed until people start acting differently." Change isn't just talking differently, it's about acting differently. It's about not only trying new things, it's behaving to one another and towards our community in ways that are new and different. If missional pastoral leadership, he writes, is about the transformation of a congregation so they collectively can fulfill the mission they corporately, all of us together, have been given, the leadership in a post-Christendom context where we find ourselves today, where no one is expected to be in church, it requires different ways of behaving or functioning from the old list of preaching, liturgics, pastoral care, and running meetings. Friends, I learned a lot in seminary and my education about preaching, liturgics, pastoral care, and running meetings. I've developed my skills in those areas over the time that I've been a pastor, and what is needed now to move us forward is more than those. It's not only those. Yes, we need to keep doing those well. I need to keep doing those well. But what's called for now to keep moving forward is a change in behavior. We can't just fine-tune what's already going on. We have to change the way I act. I have to change the way I act in relationship with our community, in relationship with our leaders and others. I think it's going to require some changes if we want to make progress on this adaptive challenge of connecting with people and putting God's love in action in a way that's invitational and compelling and that invites people to experience God in their own lives. Not people that are already connected, but those who haven't yet connected with the faith. Maybe in any congregation, we're going to have to do some things differently. And it's going to require me taking actions that are different than what I've done in the past, those that I'm most familiar with, some new learning, and it's a little bit scary, but I'm excited to be on the journey with you. Thank you for engaging in this content today. I've been enjoying reading this book together, Canoeing the Mountains by Tod Bolsinger. I invite you to pick up a copy if you haven't already. You can find the previous chapters on our YouTube channel, as well as share your comments. I invite you to share in a conversation with others, or perhaps drop a comment to share what's your question mark. What new have you learned, an answer to a question that you have or didn't even know that you had? What's shed light? What's given perspective on you, for your own leadership, for your life, or perhaps for our congregation together? And what is an arrow? What points a way ahead, a way that you might act differently, that we might be able to together live into what God is calling us to and be a part of the work that God is already blessing in our community. Thanks for joining in today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.